Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we are going to type out our Firebase utils. We want to type them out so that we can end up finally typing our user store files. But starting with the utils will teach us a couple concepts that are new because we're working with async await and an external library. As well, it'll help us set up for the final typing of the user because so much of it depends on these Firebase files. To begin with, let's think about what we need to do. So first of all, let's first look at the different errors that we see all along the side here, because these are all of our type errors. And with that, we can begin actually typing out our file. So here, what we start with is this add collection and documents. So what is it that we are receiving? Collection key, if you remember, this was our method that allowed us to add a bunch of things into Firebase. We were batching them, we were committing them, and that's how we finished it. Collection key is the string representing the collection we want to add this to. Objects to add. What is objects to add? Objects to add is going to be an array of some specific type of object that we are trying to add into our DB. So here, because it could be some random type that we don't know in the future, we want to make it so that we can pass it in as a generic. The only thing we know that for sure exists on this object is a type title. So here I can even make a new type called object to add. We can export this out because in the future, maybe we might need it. And again, the only thing it has is some title, which is a string, because using that title is oftentimes how we're going to determine what it's going to be. So here we can just add that as the type T as an array. And then this field, I actually think it's not even being used. So this might actually be an extra field that was unused that we can just get rid of. Now, let's continue. The next thing we need to type is our get categories and documents method. So here, this is an async function. Actually, earlier here, with the same async function, we want to return something. This function doesn't return anything. With async functions, you always return a promise. And within the promise, you have a value. So for us, we're not actually resolving or returning any values. So we can just make sure that this returns a promise of void. Whereas for get categories and documents, does this return something? Yes, it does. What does it return though? In this particular case, it returns some category data. The category for us has to do with our category reducer. So here we actually already have this category data as a type. We also have the corresponding category items. So let's first just bring in the category. So we're going to go up here and we're going to import category from our category types. And again, it has the title, the image URL, as well as the items. So that's what we need. We can come down here to our get categories and documents. And what we know that we get back from this function is going to be the data of this category. So it's a promise, because it's an async function, of our category as an array. If we look at our return though, here we see that this is actually not working because what we get is a bunch of query snapshots. The reason for this is because we know what it is that Firebase gives us back, but Typescript doesn't know that. We've looked inside of our Firebase DB, we know what the object will be. So this is where we actually need to cast the value. So what we can say is that doc_snapshot.data like this is going to be as category. And essentially what we're saying is that we know that document snapshot.data is going to come back as a category type. So just cast this value of what you get back from the data call as a category type. And this is all we need. Typically, you don't want to do too much casting because you're essentially telling Typescript that this is what you're getting back. But oftentimes when you interface with a third-party API, this is going to be one of the things that you are going to have to keep track of. But casting here is not a bad thing to do. And with that, we now have this function typed out. The next thing that we need to do is type out our create user document from auth. So here we need to type out our user auth. Now, the user auth is actually something that we call user auth. What it really is this user object that we get from, luckily, Firebase. So this is already something that's typed. Firebase auth gives it to us. And here, if you hover over this, oh, sorry, not Firestore, Firebase auth right up here. If you hover over this, you see that it is actually an existing interface for a user account. So that is really handy because now we can just type it like so. Similarly, let's think about what else we need inside of this function type definition. We know that with this, we also get some additional information. Now, for now, all we're adding for this additional information is just the display name. And this is even optional. So here we can put it like this and cast it like so. And the reason why we only have a display name, of course, is because according to our signup form, that's the only values we add. If we were to add more, we can, of course, add to this additional information here. If you want to keep the types for this file inside of a separate Firebase file, you can do that as well. That's a pattern. For now, I'm keeping it all inside of Firebase Utils because this is really the only place I'm using it so far. Moving on. We also need to type out the actual user data. So here I'm going to type out user data because user is already claimed by Firebase auth. This is a type that is equal to something that gives us a created at date, which is a date. We also have display name, which is a string. And we also have email, which is a string. So this user data, what is the actual user data? Well, user data is something that we get back from this final setDoc call where we return back this user snapshot. So here, this is where we need to tell the actual function and utilize our user data. So let's think about the flow of this document. What can we get back? We can primarily get back user snapshot, and inside of this user snapshot can either be the user data or it can be nothing. Because if we log out, remember, we also run this through our listener. Our onAuth listener calls create user doc auth. Regardless of what happens, if you sign in, if you sign up, and if you sign out, all three values of user auth get passed in, which is why we have this check. So here we might actually resolve to undefined. So that means that this function can return back a promise value of both this void value, or it can return back this user snapshot. Now, user snapshot is not the data. We're not returning back the data. We're returning back a snapshot. So this snapshot, though, is actually already typed for us. And this is something that Firebase gives us. So here up inside of Firestore, we can get a query document snapshot type. And this snapshot type is going to hold the value inside of the snapshot. So here we can just say, okay, it's a snapshot type, and inside of it is the data, user data. And there we go. The last thing we need to do, of course, is tell this user snapshot what it's going to be. And for us, as mentioned before, with Firebase, we can cast this as well. We can say that this is going to be a query document snapshot of a user data type. One thing you'll notice here is inside of catch, error will not have a message type. This is because inside of every catch, by default, it is going to be of an unknown type. So for us, instead of trying to just call directly error.message, we can just console log the whole error. Again, with unknown is very similar to any. The only difference is that unknown is not resettable. You can't set the value of any unknown to something else. But just like any, TypeScript has no idea what it's going to be. There's no type associated to it. And the reason for this is because you can catch numerous types of errors. TypeScript, or JavaScript, sorry, not even TypeScript. JavaScript's catch does not know what's going to get thrown. For this reason, there can't be an associated type to it. So for us, that's fine. We're just going to say catch. We're just logging it anyways. That's fine for us. Moving on, as far as these email and password goes, we know that these are going to be a string, and we know that password is also a string. Now, what is it that create user email and password give us back? Well, if you hover over it, it tells us, it gives us back a promise of user credential. So here, if we hover over this, we already say that we're going to get that back. Promise of either user credential or undefined. The reason it's undefined is because we might exit early. So we don't need to type this. Similarly with this one, sign in with email password, it's a promise of user credential. So again, we don't need to type this. We just need to type our parameters to ensure that they go in as strings. Because again, we see that we get a promise, user credential, or undefined. Our sign out user, promise of void, because once you sign out itself returns you void as a promise. Now for our on-auth state change listener. What is the callback that we're passing in? The callback is a function, but it's a very specific function. It is a next or observer type. So this again is a very special function that gets called with the .next as a callback whenever the observer changes. Now, luckily for us, we actually can import this type as well from Firebase. So here we just go up to Firebase auth and we just import in next or observer. And what this gives us is the user, because on-auth state change is always passing us this user that we already saw earlier. Again, this is a user account. So whenever the auth state changes, Firebase is trying to give us that user account. So luckily for us, that's all we need as well. As for our last one, get current user, this was that type that we had created to return us back a promise. And that promise is going to be either a user or null. Because again, when we call this, what we are looking for as on-auth state changed, we might get back the currently signed in user or authenticated user, or if there's no user, Firebase gives us null. So as a result, the promise can only resolve with user or null. And that's it. We learned a lot about typing out these async functions, mainly wrapping them in promises. And we learned a lot about all of these different additional casting opportunities we have to do working with an external API, but also these types that Firebase gives us. But now we have fully typed out our Firebase file. So that's it. Now we can start using this inside of our user reducer files. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to take these type files, try it out yourself inside of the user reducer files, and then join me in the next video where we'll do it together.